as well as the latest trends in the crypto markets. The format for today's conversation is 1 hour total, 30 minutes of chat between Matt and I, and then 30 minutes of questions. Please submit your questions at any time during this conversation, and we'll be picking the most interesting one and try to cover them all, really. So Matt, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Very welcome. So a quick word on Matt. Matt has a bit of a legendary following, so I'm sure that for our attendees, no introduction is necessary. So Matt is a serial entrepreneur. He's been working in crypto and blockchain since about 2014 with Fold. Since then, Matt, you've launched, of course, Keep and Thesis that we'll talk about in depth today. And you're currently based in Georgia.
That's right.
Atlanta, more specifically. Your husband of 2 children. Congratulations on that.
Thank you, sir.
So over to you, Matt, if you want to add something to your bio, and then we can get going.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm also proud to say that the all-time high yesterday drove me to an all-time high on my squats. So I'm a novice weightlifter. No, really excited to be here and talk about a few projects we've been working on.
Awesome. That's great. So today we're talking about tBTC and Keep. And the reason why we are talking about this at CoinList and we are extremely excited about that project, and we have been for a number of months, is that CoinList has established a network of distribution for BTC and BTC as ERC20s. So technically, up until a few days ago, only wrapped Bitcoin. And we just onboarded tBTC yesterday and made it available for immediate minting and redemption on our platform. So we'll talk about that today and look into the project a bit deeper, and then cover, of course, the latest market activity in Bitcoin that we're all very excited about.
Sounds good.
So Matt, if you want to kick off and tell us the backstory behind tBTC and Keep, what gave you the idea to build something that groundbreaking and complex? And yeah, give us your...
Yeah, of course. Well, I'll try to abbreviate my quick history because I think it motivates. So as you said, I started Fold in 2014, and Fold was very much a Bitcoin 1.0 like payments company. And since then it's evolved. I think if you guys are following it, you'll see it's a lot more about Bitcoin as rewards rather than payments. But there were a lot of problems that I ran into running that business. One of them was dealing with, we were interested in decentralizing gift card marketplaces. We were interested in kind of a thinner business, almost a DApp on top of the market that exists today. And so this led me in this direction where, as Bitcoin kind of came to this soul searching moment in 2016 and 2017 around what the future of the network would be, I had started looking at, well, how can Ethereum help with some of these problems that I'd run into? So that's what led to the launch of Keep. And the idea is that, when I started playing with Ethereum, I was interested in building these decentralized marketplaces, but there was no place to put private data. So the cool left turn that we took with this whole project is that, as we built out this platform, it's not 2017. Developers aren't falling from the sky. And actually, I think that's incredibly interesting about this bull run. It's like things are going well, but I'm pretty chill. Most people I know in the space are pretty chill. It is an all-time high, but the euphoria from 2017 has not yet reappeared. So we realized that we needed to build the first app on top of Keep. And a really obvious one for us was a permissionless Bitcoin bridge. We already had all the pieces we needed. It turns out that we already had the Bitcoin experience. And so it just made sense.
How many people did it take to build that project, which by many standards is one of the most complex project out there in terms of decentralization on ETH? How many geniuses did it take?
Well, I think it depends on how you count and whether you keep continue all the engineers on Keep. It's probably around 20 people who have got their hands on this overall. The fiddly, the architecture and stuff like that, it's 3 or 4 people who have weighed in. But then, even outside the company, we tried to do this in a way that we pulled the community in the design process. And so you'll see Dan Robinson and Charlie Noyes and Georgios and a bunch of these other kind of mechanism thinkers got involved quite early.
Understood. So at a very high level, tBTC is a representation of Bitcoin on the ETH blockchain. I am a user, right? I am a user. I have a Bitcoin. As you've said time and time again, Bitcoin is, you are a Bitcoin lover, but Bitcoin, the architecture is not really where innovation happens. So tBTC is a way to pour the value that one has on Bitcoin into the ETH blockchain.
Yeah, that's right.
So tell me more about that, and then if you can touch upon what is the role of keep the token inside that construct.
Yeah, of course. So the idea is that we kind of approach this from the Ethereum direction and from the Bitcoin direction, right? So what we wanted to build from the Bitcoin direction is a permissionless sidechain. There's like an asterisk, which is built on Ethereum, right? So we wanted to build something like what people wish that Liquid was. But actually, the sidechain that we've been talking about since I first got involved with Bitcoin in late 2013. So this was our opportunity from that side to really say, like, look, we're doing this from first principles. We're doing this in a way that's highly secure and that Bitcoiners, if they actually look into it, will approve of. And then from the Ethereum side, I think a lot of the focus on bringing Bitcoin to Ethereum has been on price, right? So a lot of it has been, we need collateral for DeFi or we need price exposure to take Bitcoin positions. So obviously as 2020 progressed, I think it became more and more about collateral. But what you didn't have was you didn't have censorship resistance and you didn't have any sort of assurance that like more Bitcoin wasn't being printed. So for example, you can look at something like wBTC, which is a synthetics project. You can clearly get, a somewhat reliable price exposure on Ethereum. But what you can't be confident in is that every wBTC that you hold means that one L1 Bitcoin was taken out of circulation. So that's really the goal with tBTC, is to maintain not just this trust minimized interoperability, but also kind of why we got into Bitcoin in the first place.
Got it. And so keep the token in that world. What is it used for? How does it relate to Bitcoin?
Yeah. So, I try to talk about it as little as possible, which is kind of funny, right? So you have to ask yourself, like, okay, how does this bridge work? Well, the people who are actually running it are holding a token called Keep. And what that lets them do is it lets them join the network. And instead of like having a permission set of custodians, like you might, you'll see with wBTC, like we've seen with Liquid. Instead, you can buy this token and you stake it, and then you can act as an operator on this bridge. So why would someone want to do that? Well, you can take the fees. So what you're kind of doing is it's almost like you're putting down a taxi medallion or a franchise where you've carved out, this is the amount of network revenue I want and the amount of work that I'll do for the network. And then that's pro rata how you earn. So it's a work token. It's not some flashy payment token. And honestly, if it's doing its job, it's in the background while projects like tBTC can remain censorship resistant.
Right. Yeah, I think it's very important for our users to understand that the intricacies around Keep, around collateralization, and all the signing mechanism is completely hidden and really unnecessary for a typical user who just wants to mint tBTC with Bitcoin. So there is really two sides of that ecosystem where users can just come in and exchange tBTC for BTC and vice versa. And then the kind of the workers, the signers who do the deeper work are, using the Keep token, signing and bonding and making sure that the network works well. Is that correct?
No, that's said it very well.
Great. So at CoinList, we're extremely excited to add tBTC to our distribution network because we kind of looked at Bitcoin back in January of this year.
Yep.
And we said, wait a second. So Bitcoin is that behemoth of a market cap in crypto, right? About, call it 60% of every market cap, whatever that number means, and the relevance of it.
Of course.
relatively speaking, it is the biggest thing out there. And then we looked at DeFi. Back then it was just Uniswap and Kyber networks and just a handful of projects. And Bitcoin, wrap Bitcoin was trading barely 1% of what DeFi was trading back then. It was 50K, 60K a day. And we looked at it, we're like, how does that make any sort of sense? So we thought, okay, DeFi might not be big right now, but even if it stays small, people need to be able to use the value that they invested in Bitcoin maybe a year ago, maybe 5 years ago, if they were really lucky, and use that in DeFi because things are getting built. You touched upon Compound and Synthetics and all these really exciting projects. So we built that bridge where people would come in and send a Bitcoin, you receive a wBTC automatically. You don't have to talk to BitGo, you don't have to buy Bitcoin ETH, sell ETH wBTC or any of that stuff. No slippage, no bid offer crossing. So that was great. It was in January. Back in the day, we traded maybe 150K a month. Now we're trading, more than $20 million with wBTC a month. And now
you sort of sparked the growth in wBTC. You kind of, it was very difficult to use before you guys got involved, and I understand why, but I think that's why we're excited to work with you. Is you had this moment where you made wBTC a thing,
and it was really interesting to see because the reason why it was complicated is because market makers wanted to trade it, so bid offer spread and slippage, which was annoying. The BitGo setup to mint and redeem to wrap and unwrap was complex, and then what we did, any market maker could have done it. But the problem was that for a market maker, immobilizing Bitcoin and wrap Bitcoin in a liquidity pool is costly because a market maker typically makes 20 to 25% net revenue per annum on every dollar that they have in their balance sheet. We don't have that, we don't have those bots. We're not a market maker, and we can source Bitcoin very cheaply because we are, very integrated with VCs and family offices and high net worth individuals who are sitting on mountains of BTC and don't really care about it. So we looked at it, and then we're like, well, who's going to use BTC? If you want to buy it, you might as well buy it on Coinbase or Kraken. It's cheaper than going on Kyber. Sure. So then it was really about the ecosystem, the Compound, the makers, those big platforms that allow you to get leverage, to get yield, to get this and that. And at first, these guys were like, oh, we can't onboard wBTC. It's too small. It's too illiquid. I'm like, well, we're working on making it more liquid. So as you said, because we did that work slowly but surely, we showed them, hey, look, it is becoming more liquid. If you want to liquidate $500,000, you can do it on CoinList immediately. Okay, we're going to take a look. And then it was a domino effect, right? And tBTC is a different project, and there are many representation of Bitcoin on the ETH blockchain at the moment. But it's really a project that we love. The decentralization aspect. The BitGo is out of the picture now. This is entirely censorship resistant, and we are beyond excited to get tBTC on our platform and see what the users are doing with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely same. I mean, I think there's this opportunity right now where with what you guys dealt with wBTC, it was, this is not really BitGo's core business. They don't really have a very easy way to mint. And you came in and you made it easy for us. The reason it's difficult is because there's a cross-chain dApp that is talking to two blockchains, and it's fairly immature. And so I think it's actually kind of a funny parallel where you guys came in and made it easy to get tBTC. And I hope what this means is that we'll be able to eventually get to the point where both of these things are sort of approaching each other, right? Because that's my grand scheme is if we can get the UX of a centralized service, but always fall back on something that is, resistant, that's ideal.
Exactly. You can still go full UX, full MetaMask and mint your tBTC yourself if you want to.
Of course.
It is, it's still it's a good experience, but it's still a bit clunky. It takes time. There is a bit of knowledge curve to get onto, and many funds are not comfortable, putting value on their MetaMask. However, they are comfortable sending Bitcoin to CoinList and clicking the mint button. So here we think there is a very interesting crossover, and it's not Cefi versus DeFi and centralized versus not decentralized. It's just another way to access, as you said, the underlying base of the asset, which is censorship resistant, and it is whether you access it on MetaMask, CoinList, or other places.
No, exactly. I mean, I think you're hinting toward a trend that we're going to see through 2021 when you talk about the Cefi versus DeFi. That's a false dichotomy. Clearly, it's a spectrum. And I mean, some people I work with would be aghast that I would say that because I'm usually a decentralization maximalist, right? Like, obviously, I want to be able to use all of these systems and never ask for someone else's permission. But on the flip side, money is centralized. There are pools of capital that aren't getting deployed because of this artificial line, I think, between CeFi and DeFi. So I'm really glad to see that you guys are tackling the problem, as well as, we've seen a couple other exchanges and related parties who are starting to dip their toes in. And it's going to be interesting to see like who embraces and who kind of gets out in front versus who maybe misses the opportunity.
That's absolutely right. And even, CeFi versus DeFi and blah, blah, we are in crypto every single day, right? We play with things. We've seen Sushi and Uniswap and the liquidity pools. And for us, it's like, paying our taxes. We know about that and we're comfortable with it. But the learning curve for a new fund, for someone who gets into the space, even who has money, who's sophisticated, who's, sharp, it's still pretty complex. Like, it was complex 3 years ago. Now imagine the amount of information you got to digest before being able to say, I kind of get what's going on in DeFi, just at a very, very high level. So I completely agree with you. If for these people who are not willing or able or don't have the time to really get into the intricacies of MetaMask and how to interact with those UX and Web3 dApps, well, there are places for them. And it doesn't need to be either or, and winner takes all. No, it's a spectrum. And some people will use us because they feel more comfortable with it and they don't care about KYC. And some people will really, really care about not KYCing and, the free aspect of things, and they will spend the time. And we need to be able to service both for that market to grow.
Agreed.
Wonderful.
So yeah, the next step, I think we're lined up for Maker. I think that's going to be our next one that I'm hoping happens in January. And after that, I mean, I think sky's the limit for what we can do with this project.
For sure. I mean, it's really the start. You guys went live, remind me, late September of this year? Right. So also, as Uniswap was building those giant liquidity pools, and you were very careful at the beginning, right? You limited the minting amount. You really wanted things to be, like not too crazy.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard because the responsible engineer side of me and then the startup guy were conflicted over this, right? So we set an artificial cap that really meant that we had to miss out on a lot of these kind of early liquidity incentives. And we did that because we wanted to protect user funds. This is we're not like progressively decentralizing. There's not like a man behind the curtain who's running this network. If people mess up, funds can be lost. This is real stuff, and there's not customer service, And so I think doing that slowly and responsibly, it kind of points to the little bit of a cultural difference between our team coming from Bitcoin and maybe a lot of the DeFi teams that we've seen. I shouldn't say all of them. We've seen Compound and some of these guys who are just fantastic. But so we wanted to be very careful, and we left a lot of growth on the table. But I think long term it's going to be worth it, because if someone's ever going to get comfortable using something like MetaMask and then flipping back and forth on their ledger between Ethereum and Bitcoin and trying to use this thing, they need to be sure that the infrastructure works. And in the meantime, before they're used to that, I think having that additional layer of there's someone I can call is just vital.
Right. You guys have a vibrant Discord community of very close to your quote unquote clients and users. That also is part of the legend of tBTC and your persona. Very reachable. You answer questions. You're super responsive. So that is something that everybody loves about crypto. And you're doing this. You're doing this right. It's true that you kind of arrived, and by limiting that, you also after September and Sushi and all that saga, DeFi kind of took a breather after a crazy summer.
Yep.
As you say, this is for the long term. This is not just the next hot token that people are going to try to flip. So very excited about that, and that carefulness that you guys have been really thinking first about, and seeing where the network develops from here.
It's not over. I think that was DeFi summer #1.
For sure.
And I mean, I don't try to be much of a trend spotter in crypto, because I just know that once one started, you've got 3 to 6 months, right? But I think that there are some core ideas in DeFi that are going to stick around. Maybe fewer food coins next summer.
Please less food coins. Yeah, I mean the rally in the DeFi tokens recently is great to see. That it's not just straight line down to zero. Compound is back around 150. Uniswap stable at nearly $4. Sushi at nearly $3. I mean, it's good to see. Maybe it is that wave of Bitcoin buying from institutional that is kind of trickling down to the smaller assets, because if you want to invest in the next hot thing, this is really the biggest thing that we discovered this year.
I mean, I think that's always what people have discussed for years, the whole alt season idea. When Bitcoin makes gains and everyone drop their alts and rush back to the king, and then when they take their gains from that and kind of pre-populate into smaller groups. And what's going to be interesting to see is that, and I'm fascinated, and I don't know if I'm ready to make big projection, is that now that Bitcoin is so plugged into a Bitcoin run-up is suddenly leading to high gas on Ethereum. And we're seeing, we're every price move now is leading to a ton of on-chain activity. And so, even though I'm pretty famously BTC first and ETH is sort of like a very small second for me in terms of my personal assets, you have to think like if something's getting used that much every time there's price movement and it's an incredibly volatile space, if I were an ETH guy, I'd say that's probably bullish.
For sure. And even at the ERC20 level for Bitcoin, every time there is volatility, whether rally or dumps, we see huge spikes in use of our wBTC pool, mostly from our API users, which are by and large DEXs and market makers.
Yeah,
they make more markets, and really the activity that Bitcoin is getting is mimicked in DeFi now much more so than it was back in Q1. So we really have that, now that asset has two legs on two different blockchains. Of course, there are other blockchains, but those are the main ones.
Yeah.
And we see those activities really, completely paralleled. And it's fun to see because it's a behavior that didn't exist at all only 6 months ago.
No, can you imagine? Like we used to, last year we were talking about DEXs, like, oh yeah, 1 year will be the year of the DEX. And it had kind of become a joke. And now I'm like, there's a certain class of trades where I'll always go DEX first. And so I think that's a really significant shift. It almost can't be overstated. And I think we're going to see through the rest of this bull run, what does that actually mean? Does this mean like a greater coupling of the price of BTC and ETH and all of these ERC20s, but maybe not other assets? I don't know, but I'm pretty excited about it.
Absolutely. And even, new assets, new blockchains, first thing that we hear about is, okay, is there a wrap version?
Yeah.
Like Filecoin was launched about 2 months ago exactly today.
Yep.
And I think 3 or 4 Filecoins are either in the works or shipped already. So it's fun to see what exactly will happen with ETH, from that point perspective versus projects like Cosmos or Polkadot, where it's kind of like, okay, do we need all of this? Maybe not, but the market will figure it out. People are excited to work on it and ship it, and then, whatever will be left, and if it's a winner take all or not, and we'll see. But at the end of the day, if people want access, we need to be able to offer them access.
Well, what I'm interested to see is, are there any other assets that are going to matter? Right. So obviously, USD pegs are incredibly important, and that's a big part of this on-chain activity we're seeing. But we're seeing wBTC. I imagine if these other chains get bigger, we'll see lots of their version of WETH, right, and wrapped ETH. But I'm also seeing projects that are reaching out saying, "Can you wrap our coin?" And so it's interesting that
with the same architecture as
with similar,
Whoa.
And so that's pretty incredible to me. And I know that BitGo and some other projects have had similar, where it's like it's a new gatekeeper of is your chain available in the DeFi ecosystem on Ethereum. So it's going to be really fascinating to me if any of those other assets can really break out. I think one that I look at is Zcash right now. We've seen that it's got a couple wrapped variants, and we've considered doing one ourselves. And it's like, will it maintain relevance? Actually, that's the whole question. Will it maintain relevance, and is this going to help?
Right. Last year it was, layer 1 this, and Tezos is better, and EOS is this, and that. And it just feels like ETH has such a head start in terms of stuff built on it. It might not be the perfect solution, but when you want to experiment, I don't know, let's say I'm 20 years old and I'm thinking, where should I build something fun? I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I try to remain a pluralist because I remember that the same way that I felt about Bitcoin when Ethereum came along is the same way that someone else is going to feel. Like, you know, always our what is it? Your baby will grow up. Your favorite will typically end up being replaced at some point, right? But I have to agree. Like you've seen huge amounts of money dumped on developer growth on these new chains. And what I'm interested in at this point is I'm like, okay, maybe what you should really be trying to do is develop a differentiated community, because just fighting for the same Ethereum developers doesn't seem to be working.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, for example, we've started working with Cello, and we'll be launching a tBTC variant on Cello soon,
Nice.
and they have some very different community norms. Like not bad, but just like I was like almost uncomfortable because it's very focused on like charity and inclusiveness. Those things are great, but it's just not something that I'm used to being like
Right.
kind of such a norm. And so it's just going to be interesting to see, can any of these chains come up with a community that can actually bootstrap itself beyond just paying devs at hackathons? You know?
Absolutely right. Yeah, and find their niche. You know,
Yeah.
it's like if you just try to replicate what's happening on ETH, I mean, it's good, but you have a few years to catch up with.
Yep,
For
exactly.
example, you know, when Curve.fi, it's a bit of a, I don't know if it's the fairest comparison, but when Curve.fi was launched, you know, people were like, well, Uniswap is better. But Curve.fi did something really, really well, stablecoin pools, you know.
Yep.
And now you have hedge funds and market makers using them for size, because you can trade $50 million of USDT versus USDC at 5 bips slippage. That's something on Kraken that would cost you 10x the price. So they are extremely good at that. And they got really, really successful with that product market fit. So what will it be for the other blockchains? You know, I think the behavior has been, oh, you know what, let's send a lot of money to a bunch of developers and see what they come up with. It has worked, you know, and we organize a lot of hackathons for them as well. And it's exciting to see, you know, how to prop up that creativity. But it's not that time is running out, but time is against them. Because this year, if anything, ETH has just like put on you know, hit the gas pedal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think, you know, what I run into growing our own community around Keep is you have this like, there's a famous piece on open source software called the Cathedral and the Bazaar. And you have this situation where if you were a VC coin, and I think that we're right on the edge of one and trying really hard to make sure that our community has the reins. But you have to go from trying to grow like a Silicon Valley startup to trying to get people really stoked and like deeply engaged in your project. But, and this is the trick, you also have to have a narrative that makes people feel like there's a different thing happening. And that's something that usually, like if you're doing this like the Silicon Valley way, you've built a startup, you've designed all of your products. But I got to tell you, if you look at Ethereum, that's not how all these dApps work. I mean, we're seeing like here's a based flaming skull here and some weird farming memes, and you know, you're getting like this just really, but like people have gone in all different directions, but there's still this narrative that is DeFi. And so what I want to see is, when does a storyteller come about from one of these projects and really find that. And I never thought as an engineer that I would think that this narrative thing was so interesting, but I think that our space, it brings out you know, the negative version is tribalism, but it gives you an asset to rally around and find your people. And so it's like, you know, this isn't it kind of reminds me of like early IRC days. You're finding your people, but now you also hold this token and are trying to do something with it. So I think we got to look for those projects that see that.
So when it comes to onboarding new, you know, working on new layer ones for you guys, you know, Keep, you mentioned Cello, how do you think about it? Should it be community driven in terms of what you say yes or no to? How do you reconcile that with revenues? Because clearly, you know, this is a source of revenue for the company.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So, so because all of these chains are bootstrapping, they have a cold start problem. So if we say no to every chain, the chain could never possibly survive. Like, I mean, similarly with other projects, we're not going to be the one that is the kingmaker. And so what I look at is two, maybe three things. So, I mean, well, first is just practical. What's the engineering lift? So if you're Cello, you're so compatible with Ethereum and the technical changes are very like surgical to what they're trying to accomplish. That as a developer, it really makes it kind of a no-brainer as someplace for me to experiment. But then you got to think of what comes with that. Every dApp that we've shipped now has to have some way to connect to, MetaMask and something else. We have to think about, is there anything different on this chain that we had to do in our application? So like the UX doesn't exist for any of this, and that's where a lot of this work comes from. But then you go further and you look at something, you look at something like Solana. So Solana, our engineers are interested in looking at it, but we have to question, like, is the community as adjacent? How much usage is it going to get? So to be frank, it's tough. For me, it's very important that we find a way on each chain to make sure that the token holders and community actually get some upside, right? So like if the company is paid to develop something, that's not really a huge win. And so one of the ways that we're doing that, which we'll be announcing, but it's come up, so why not, is we'll actually on each of these chains that we launch on be basically airdropping to the Keep token holder set on that chain. And then folks from our community who are interested in the chain can claim. There will be additional liquidity mining on each of these chains. And I think what's going to happen, and this is going to be really fun, is that you're going to have a bit of a fork, right? Where some people will be working on Celo, some people will be working on Ethereum. It's not actually the same token holder set. So I have no idea what exchanges are going to do. I don't know how they're going to deal with the different assets. But I do know that that I think that we can keep the community on our end tight, and it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, there's a whole fresh sets of problems. It's a good problem to have, a new blockchain coming to see you. And what's great with the way you are going to implement this is that you have a way to bootstrap that community via your token.
Exactly.
That's phenomenal. We are, onboarding a new asset on our network. Really, the only thing we can hope for is people to use it. You can qualitatively say and quantitatively, okay, so many people actually took delivery of this, are now working on that, and that is the power of crypto. And the beauty of working in the DeFi space, real DeFi space.
You know what I think is fascinating is, like, from the Bitcoin side, all of this, the money printing and the tokens, it's like unacceptable, like from a really hardcore Bitcoiner perspective. But I think it's one of the few things, I don't want to say I'm bullish on, because like I'm not bullish on money printing, but just like the targeted user growth and acquisition, I think is fantastic. Like, I look at what SushiSwap did with Uniswap, and I mean, initially, I think a lot of people in the Ethereum community were like sort of like grossly fascinated.
Yeah.
They were like, they said they didn't like it, but if you look at how many of them actually hold sushi, well, but then, but I looked at what they did, and since then, like, they forked Uniswap, but now they have this totally different product roadmap and a very different community from what Uniswap has. And so I just there's something really powerful there, and if we can get out of our own way, I think that there's a lot that these new networks can use and learn from something like SushiSwap to bootstrap growth.
Absolutely, and it was wonderful to see. Yes, called the vampire attack and very dramatic names.
Sure.
But first of all, it was brilliant. And second of all,
it was brilliant. Yeah,
it was brilliant. I mean, no doubt. And you gotta give kudos. And if someone has a really good idea, that's crypto. They can implement it. And if people truly hate it, then you know what? It's gonna be a failure. And Uniswap, was racing like to get the token shipped and everything. And in the end, they also took we're gonna take more time to do this and to get our own rewards. And the community in the end, went back to them. And it's not like it's still Sushi is a contender,
but Sushi's had a resurgence,
right?
Right?
Massive resurgence.
Like, it's still a thing.
Right, and it's fair. It's not barrier to entry. It's not people are forbidden to move because we log this and that because we're an exchange and we don't want you to move. No, it was open and transparent and fair and square.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I'm fascinated by. I mean, we're only going to see more of it in 2021.
Whoops.
There we go.
Internet dropped. Sorry about that.
No, it's 2020. This
It's
is what
2020.
happens every day.
That's the perk of working in Central America.
Yeah.
Power works great, but sometimes electricity goes down. All right, so actually it's a good segue to start taking questions from our audience. This one is coming from Dimitri. What plans are you guys making to have keep staking accessible for smaller investors? Anything on the roadmap to get that barrier lower, and why is it where it is at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Is there ever? So the way Keep works, there's a minimum keep stake, and the reason that we do that is that you can't, like, if you look at ETH2, you can't have an infinite number of validators on a network. You start running into core technological issues. And when people talk about scalability, this is one of the things they're talking about: the scaling the validator set. So our thought with our min stake for Keep was, we know where we can get this technology, but we aren't sure how robust the networking is going to be at the start. So we actually have a linear progression where the minimum stake goes down over 2 years from 100,000 Keep, which is where it started, down to 10,000 Keep. So it's currently at 70,000. Now, if you guys follow my work much, you'll know that I don't love upgradable contracts. We try to keep them to a minimum and keep code immutable. And so because of that, we cannot reduce, like, the team has no power to reduce the min staking amount. But I would really like to make staking more accessible. I mean, it's just like, it's really strong for censorship resistance. And obviously we want to grow our community and have more people take part in running tBTC. So there are maybe 3, and I'll try to keep it short, but there are maybe 3 efforts right now to do that. One of them is ETH-only staking. So this is the temporary waiver of the requirement to use Keep in the system at all. It's an effort to distribute Keep. Folks who use Keep end up making a lot more money, but if you don't, you can just put in whatever ETH that you've got and you can start earning a return. So that's on the decentralized side. On the centralized side, we're talking to quite a few people about how can we actually offer a centralized on-ramp for ETH stakers into Keep. So this is less about a minimum staking amount and like pay to play and those issues, and it's more about just technical proficiency. The network still requires real hobbyists. It's more difficult to run. I'd probably say it's more difficult to run than an ETH2 validator. It requires some amount of monitoring. You're going to want to peek at a stats page frequently, and so for a lot of people that's too much. So another push will be, obviously we would love to work with CoinList. We've talked to a number of exchanges who are offering staking services now to make it much simpler for people to actually just slide in and use a centralized service and stake by proxy.
I see. In terms of starting to involve people like CoinList or exchanges, I'm sure the distribution vector that you guys are looking at is getting on centralized exchanges.
Of course.
Maybe Binance and Coinbase extra. So how do you think about that? And
Sure.
because you have a community that is, of course, hardcore DeFi, and getting on a centralized exchange has a number of hoops you need to jump through. How do you think about it?
Well, it's funny because I feel like we've kind of gone a middle path, which is not ideal, right? So I think there was a path for token projects where they would do this thing where they didn't want to, depending on how legally maybe conservative they were, they might have gotten very, very involved with the exchange listing process, or they didn't. But it was really, the focus was like centralized exchanges are this gatekeeper, and once you're on a particularly high enough value centralized exchange, that kind of the levy breaks and you can be listed on the rest. And that happens for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the tech is difficult for exchanges, but also regulatory reasons. But then on the other side, you have projects like YAM, which just are insane. It was just an insane launch. And if you guys aren't familiar, just check out news stories from August around YAM Finance. But they were able to purely bootstrap their liquidity in a really robust market very quickly on Uniswap before, of course, it went down in flames. Obviously, that was where the story was going. So there's this 2 ends of the spectrum, which is a little bit older school and new school. And so we've taken this middle path where I don't particularly pursue exchange listings. For Keep, we actually have a policy where we won't talk to exchanges, which is pretty far out, right? But for tBTC, we've started to, and I think it's still, it's still a growing asset, and so it's like you have to go slowly. The win for us for tBTC is actually what you guys have just done with CoinList. As much as having tBTC listed places is great, it's just a wrapped Bitcoin. Like, yes, you can trade it and you can arb and you can keep a good spread, but as you said, there are pools like Curve where that's better than most centralized exchanges. So what I'm interested in is helping people exit. So like if you could imagine, Kraken's just announced Lightning support, Bitfinex has Lightning support. If you can imagine withdrawing your Bitcoin from Kraken or from Bitfinex onto Lightning or Ethereum, that's my goal ultimately for the UX. And whether or not you care about the asset, that's kind of secondary, as long as you know that it's secure.
Got it.
Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of my thought there.
Okay. Yeah, it's we see a lot of those a lot of projects having the same kind of thought process, being like, okay, we really want to go on exchange, but our community doesn't really want us to pay people, market makers, or to engage in conversations, because there is a bit of a black mark, especially this year when you see now new projects going on Balancer at Uniswap and doing okay and doing great. So is this the future? Is this something that we should be looking more deeply into? Clearly, the industry is changing, and there is less and less tolerance, in a way, for projects that just launch on Binance, the IEO, and I'm not sure people are excited about that anymore.
Yeah, it definitely feels like exchange listings now are really more about the diligence the exchange has done than the actual venue of trading. Right. So like, okay, if you're a new L1, clearly you need to be on this exchange. There's a technical integration, etc. But what I'm seeing is, Wi-Fi, Yearn Finance is a good example where they didn't need an exchange listing. It was kind of, but the community got really excited that there was this, like, wow, they recognize how strong a project this is, and they've listed it so early. So I think that's kind of where we're moving. I don't know if it's right. But I do think if you look at projects like Uniswap, they don't want that. Like the listing power and the gatekeeping actually is a huge liability for them as a company and as software developers. So, I expect that's going to at least be how it goes for the next 12 months. We'll see if it continues to shift in the decentralized direction.
Absolutely. And we've even seen projects coming to us and saying, hey, so we want a listing on Coinbase, but Coinbase needs a price discovery to happen before it lists.
Right.
So they advised us to launch on Uniswap first. Just kind of like, what?
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah. I mean, but it makes sense, right? If Coinbase is risking their reputation, and if people are looking at them as this provider of diligence, then go where there's not a gatekeeper first.
Right, because they get, they already have a target on their back, clearly being one of the richest US exchange out there. If on top of that, they say, well, price discovery happened here, and you know how launches can happen and be extremely wild, it's probably a risk that they want to completely offload to Uniswap, which maybe is completely free of censorship resistance.
I mean, the flip side, of course, will be tons of people will be launching. I mean, they have been launching fake tokens on Uniswap. We've had a fake Keep token launched.
Is that
you'll
right?
see. Oh yeah. I mean, it's tiny, so it wasn't a huge deal. But like you'll see all sorts of scams where the Uniswap DApp doesn't know what the token you want is. It can't tell if a token is a scam or not, and so it sort of goes back to buyer beware.
Absolutely. And Filecoin, same story. Fake smart contracts that were put out there, and do your own research for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So we've been talking about tBTC and wBTC. There is also renBTC out there and SBTC. It kind of feels like there is a good amount of BTC or ERC20s out there now. Do you think there is something that is not answered by the plethora of options that are currently available? And what would it be?
Yeah. So when I look at these projects, I see I see a reputable, centrally custodied insured project in wBTC. We're over kind of the insurance limits, but still that insurance is significant. We see renBTC, which is like, they use the term progressively decentralized, but right now it means that they're doing something quite similar to BitGo. We're custodying all the funds, but they aren't insured. They don't have the sort of like regulatory niche that and compliance that BitGo has built for itself. So we see those two. So for me, that's like, okay, we have USDC, and then we have a maybe much more dangerous baby USDT, right? And I think that we're trying to be DAI. I think that we're trying to be kind of the, okay, maybe it takes a lot of collateral, but here's your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And what we're not seeing is I don't think SBTC is there yet. We're not seeing the low collateral version. So like what is DAI, but that doesn't require locking up quite so much collateral.
Right.
And so actually that's the next thing our team's working on. We don't really share roadmaps as a policy, as you'll notice from some of these questions. Community members are like, "What are you doing?" But we try to focus on code that we've shipped. But one of the things that I'm going to be doing in Q1 and Q2 is I've been heavily invested in a tBTC v2 protocol design, and what I expect will ship is something that lowers the basically the barrier of entry for signers from 150% collateral at the back to around 10%.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's a pretty significantly different system design to enable that. So yeah, I think that's a niche. Like, can you get decentralization and censorship resistance without locking up so much collateral? And I think the answer is yes.
At a very high level, and I don't mean to price secrets from you, but
go for it.
How does that work? How does that work?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have tried to solve this economically, and they've said, well, if there's a token that collects fees, then as more Bitcoin is deposited, fees will grow. But what we've actually seen is, first, just the math doesn't work out. So you still have to be incredibly over collateralized for that to work. But then second, crypto's not a sane market, and it's going to be a long time before it is. So when we're playing God, designing these protocols and pretending like, like we know how an economy is going to unfold, we have these models, and reality has shown that that doesn't work. That increasing cash flow today to a token doesn't drive value as much as speculation. And so it's quite difficult to make models like that work. So what I've done instead, and it's not just me, so forgive me, the rest of you guys, but what we've done instead is we're looking at a model where you trot out a combination of some pretty fancy new cryptography, which was put together by we're going to get nerdy for a second. If you guys follow Threshold ECDSA and multi-party computation work, the most recent kind of culmination of that work over maybe 20 years is Canetti and Gennaro's recent paper on Threshold ECDSA in 2020. So we're implementing that, which is going to, I'm not going to go into it, can unlock a lot of things. But then the other thing that you can do is you can use that work and you can expand the signer set. So right now, every deposit in tBTC is 3 of 3. Shortly, every deposit in tBTC will be closer to 51 of 100. And so when you do that, you can say, okay, well, if you have 51 of 100 people, you have a robust random beacon, so you know these people were actually chosen fairly. How many of them are honest? And if the answer is consistently more than 0, you can start lessening collateral requirements and kind of socializing how punishments work. So my hope, and what I've seen so far on the network, is something like 95% of signers are honest. Obviously, I don't think that's a great thing that we're going to ship to mainnet, assuming 95% honesty, but somewhere between 0 and 100. And that's going to allow us to really drop the collateral.
I see. So because you increase the signer sets and socialize the potential, if one bad actor in that set misbehaves, then everybody gets slashed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's at the high level, the idea here. So everybody puts 10, but at the end it's 150 if you have a bunch of people.
Well, no, it's not going to be 150 anymore. So,
but if it's 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, sorry, because I'm a newbie.
Oh, no, good. No, it's more like this. You have and this could be a totally terrible analogy, but I'm going for it. You've got your like jar of jelly beans, and you have 2/3 of them are red and a third of them is blue, right? And so if you're just picking three, you're not going to get all three blue, right? That's very unlikely. But as the number increases, the number that you're picking increases, it's going to approach closer and closer to that 2/3. And so what you're basically saying is, okay, all of these people are going to equally put down collateral. When someone misbehaves because of this new tech, we know who it is. And so we can punish them specifically. But the cool thing is they can't own the whole network anymore. So this has become like a Sybil problem where they can't own the whole network. So anyway, there's some interesting math behind it. If you're comfortable with like, basically the binomial distribution and then this idea of identifiable abort and threshold ECDSA, it'll start to kind of unpack itself. But anyway, I hope to share some much more cogent details in written form soon.
Very cool. Yeah, and lowering that barrier to entry and the capital requirement means it's not just big market makers anymore, right, or big liquidation entities that can do it. It's me and you, because of course the code will be shared, and now I can earn yield on my Bitcoin or on my ETH by participating in the ecosystem and earning keep, and without having any technical knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the idea, and I mean that is the other piece. The technical requirements to run this stuff are just going to drop and drop and drop. If I've seen anything, it's just been incredible to see as this network grows. It's kind of like we launched an L1, but on Ethereum, in that we have this full off-chain network and this full client that we have to maintain. So it's pretty heavy engineering. But what I've been pleased to see is that we're just seeing it anneal to something very strong. And I think that with this next release, we'll take the thing that's very strong that we've built and we'll just lower the difficulty of running it and capitalizing it.
Very exciting. Is there, we're about to wrap up. Is there something that you want to, leave us with, or, some thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Well, if you guys are looking for yield on your ETH, the network is, every time people add ETH, it's getting swallowed as folks mint more and more tBTC. So if you're interested in becoming a staker, please join us on our Discord. It's chat.keep.network. They're very kind, and we're all ready to help you earn some money. And yeah, just in Bitcoin we trust. I hope that this bull run continues to be kind to all of us through 2021.
100%. Yeah, wonderful bull run. Be careful out there. Only invest what you're ready to lose. My personal view is that this is very different this time, because from talking to people at Fidelity, at Coinbase, at Genesis, these are fund managers really coming in. Those are fully funded Bitcoin. It's not BitMEX 100x leverage, that gets like all volatile and crazy. These are Bitcoin that are taking out the supply pool forever. Or for a very long time.
Yeah, they're not playing around. They're not just going to be day trading it. No.
Yeah, it took them 3 years to get there. They're buying. They're going to keep. So absolutely fantastic to see finally real institutional involvement. We've been talking about it for years. I think 2021 will be the time where this ramps up. How does that trickle into the crypto economy and regular users? It remains to be seen. Clearly, the gatekeepers for such involvement are far and few. Investment banks such as Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan will not talk to, smaller shops. They want to talk to established brands. So how will that really change the money flow, investment flow, and really the splitting of power in crypto? I think it's going to be a major shift. But in the meantime, one thing is for sure: Bitcoin should keep on appreciating. Not investment advice. Let's be clear.
We're all Bitcoin bulls today, right? Like, this is a good day for it. So
exactly, it's a good day. It's a phenomenal way to end the year, and reflect on the crypto winter that we left behind us a couple of years ago. And it just feels like we are a bit vindicated, and our friends who called us crazy, now they're asking.
They're texting us, asking us to buy. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and it feels good. And it feels good.
No, I gotta say, the call that I haven't made today is I need to call my mom, because I convinced her when we were at like maybe 4. I was like, you probably don't need all that retirement money. Okay, and maybe this was kind of an irresponsible thing to do, but she was like, "You're right," and so now I'm going to tell her the news of the great trade she's made.
Nice. That's a good chat. Good Christmas present.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Matt, for your time. It was a great chat. Again, very excited to have tBTC on the CoinList platform. You can log in if you have a wallet. Go to your Bitcoin wallet and choose the wrap option. You can either wrap your Bitcoin into wBTC or tBTC and vice versa at a fixed fee. So looking forward to seeing your flow. And yeah, join the Keep community. It's a bunch of very nice folks. Matt is the spearhead of that community, but trust me, everybody behind them is super open-minded, transparent, and great guys. So yeah, we hope to do these more often.
Yeah, same. It was great being here.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.